Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Lifting. Today's episode is being recorded on 12/15/24. We are here with Penny Bradley today. Many of you in the circles know who this person is. She requires pretty much no introduction at this particular point. So before we get into discussing anything, we must do the law of one and cement the foundation for this episode like we always do. So, Joanne?
We are all one, and when one is harmed, all are harmed. When one is helped, all are helped. Therefore, in the name of who I am, and I am one with all there is, that only the highest good be done. We pray for you, your friends, your family, to let healings, energies in, to let them love you and nourish you and bring you to your highest good. We now ask for benevolence to come in with no conflicting agenda, to be able to come in and support this conversation so people can listen to it and hear it and bring into them what they find helpful in their lives and their understanding of the world around us, and to just then let go what does not either make sense and go in peace, and that they may actually be able to take something from this. We ask for malevolent beings, mischievous beings, to be swept away at this moment so that we may have this conversation in peace and that you may listen to it in peace without interference. And with that, and with great blessings that we always send your way, we say, so be it.
So be it.
Yeah.
So, with all you that are watching this episode now, many of you have seen Penny Bradley on her channel, and even some of you listening and watching this met her at the 2024 Disclosure Now conference in St. Pete, Florida, at the Serrata. So, at this point, we are going to discuss some of her past history, and we'll go into a discussion on altars. This is a very poignant discussion, I believe, now, because it has been coming up in synchronicity after synchronicity for myself, for Joanna, and several clients. This altars, it's not a new territory for me, but I have been finding out more or less about ourselves in that area and other clients in that area where I'm seeing other parts of themselves doing things that are even a complete yin yang from how they operate in their life. I even have a good friend of mine who actually met an altar of his in the flesh himself in the neighboring town from where he lived. So one that looked like him but older. So from the SSP, it was another SSP altar. He literally met another physical version of himself from a different timeline. I find that very, very interesting. He actually got the evidence on camera, believe it or not. That's the only living person I know of that ever did it. So this is interesting.
We were just really thrilled to meet Penny and her husband, to have the opportunity to meet. One of the nice things is, again, for Chris and I, we actually don't get the opportunity to spend a lot of time looking at other people's material because we're very busy ourselves, and in fact don't like to sabotage our own thinking by being influenced potentially by what someone else is saying. So when you get to the opportunity to meet someone, Penny, your husband, and actually be able to commiserate a little bit with some of the things we were able to commiserate with, it's always a joy when you find that like-mindedness and people who have doing their own path and their own information, but we share some interesting, let's just say, either obstacles or different things that have been happening. And so there was a bit of a camaraderie and understanding of some of these problems that can arise and different things. So I think for myself and for Chris, it was a little bit of a breath of fresh air to be able to come across and to just be able to have some very frank conversation with each other, and to just genuinely be able to show support to one another. And so I really look forward to being able to say hi to them again in person when we see them again at the 2025 Disclosure Now conference. So
I'm looking forward to being at that.
Yeah.
So Penny, why don't you start with, I know you probably had to repeat this for many a show, but could you tell our audience a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go into the altars discussion.
My earth level family, my dad was a part-time preacher and full-time dairyman, and he believed that children were his workforce. And this was common the generation before his. So I was raised like I was a generation older than I actually am. So that's created some problems with my own children that I was allowed to raise here. And I say that because the programs took 7 and left 3. So, yeah, I was pregnant 10 times. But the 3 that I was allowed to raise, they are all very much of their own generation, and they're now in their 40s, so I don't know what label they're putting on that. But for them, even though I was only 20 years older than the eldest, my attitudes were more like 50 years older than theirs. So it was a hard thing for them. And I've had alters all along. I just didn't know what the problem was. But Dad raised us to work on the farm. A lot of farm families from the 50s and 60s, all of the kids worked. They still believed in the dogma that a child's labor belonged to their father until they were 21. And my parents in particular believed that if a girl wasn't married immediately on high school graduation, that she was an old maid. So they married me off at 19 to a preacher from our cult that I grew up in, Church of Christ Auntie. And I had been left with straight arrow / church mouse programming. So whatever spiritual yearnings I had were all channeled through the Church of Christ Auntie. And they did not believe in reading anything besides the King James New Testament. Mm. They even had misgivings about the Old Testament, or at least the version of it I was raised in did. So my husband, decided he wanted to be a chaplain in the state prison system. The state of California requires Masters of Divinity. So he went to San Diego State. He graduated. I didn't. Then he went to Mennonite Brethren Biblical Seminary in Fresno. He's dyslexic, so I had attended a lot of the classes and I was doing his homework because he couldn't. And I was reading his books out loud to him so that he would know the material. And being what I had been raised to be a perfect helpmeet, and raising 3 children with congenital adrenal hyperplasia. And they were in and out of the hospital a lot. And that particular disease comes from the Stewart family, as in the descendants of Robert the Bruce. Mm. And that is one of the branches of the Grail line. Yes. Okay, so this all comes together in SSP. Okay, I was kidnapped when I was 4, out of my house, out of my bed, by humans in green fatigues. We're not talking an ET abduction. We're talking Earth level military of my own country. Showed up, used something so nobody woke up but me. They took me in a green Jeep. This was right after the Korean War. So it was a CJ4. And I'm going cross country with these guys and 2 or 3 other kids that they had picked up along the way. And we go from Tulare County, where I was, we go south to LA, and then we head east on Route 66. And we travel at night most of the time. When we travel in the daytime, it's through these tunnels that I believe are now part of the maglev tunnel system. And we ended up in Langley, Virginia, at Langley Air Force Base. We were not at the base proper. We were in some old outbuilding, and I was kept in one of the basements of this building, and it was made to resemble a hospital. 1940s style hospital. Everything was white. White, 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 white. If you've seen Stranger Things, it was even more sterile than the hospital where 11 was kept.
Hmm.
Okay, there were 1,000 of us when I got there. We were each kept in our own little cubby. I was 4. And there was room for a child-sized cot across the end of the room. And there was like a foot in between the cot and a child-sized toilet and a child-sized sink. There were no mirrors. There was one window, about like this, in the door, so they could check me. And I was basically in that for when I wasn't in training for the next 5 years. There was one side trip to Montauk in fall of 61, spring of 62. And it was not the same as the Phoenix Project. So they were checking to find out what the chair did, and they were testing the butterfly effect. But there was a Draco there, the warrior turtle people.
Mm-hmm.
So when I survived the initial mind fracture program, they sent me to Montauk, and then when I survived that, they sent me back to Langley to be trained for what I had been contracted for. Now, I've said this repeatedly, if they have an NDA on me, they better produce it, because otherwise I'm speaking what I remember.
Exactly.
And I was taken before virtual reality. My understanding is the young people now coming forward, the people in their 20s, were subjected to mind fracture through virtual reality. I was subjected to the old SRA methods.
This makes sense.
Okay. The old SRA methods is you mind fracture a child through sexual assault. Now, I can go into details if you'd like, but I don't like reliving it.
No, we're not gonna, that's not really required, Bill. So it's like, you get to make the point.
It's an important
Yeah.
point to bring up.
Point to make, yeah.
Because again, I'm older as well. And so, I've certainly had people, when I bring up what I happened to me, they don't believe it because there's a 20-year age gap, between myself and other people. And so, some of the older ways of doing things, you know what I mean, were more directly brutal. They just were more directly brutal. It's how it was done.
Yeah, there were some of the younger crowd. The friend I spoke of off recording. There was somebody I know that had something that was in that physical room, but he's much younger. But I also was subjected. I had both in my SSP, where there was both virtual reality and the satanic portion of it. So it was like where some of the Air Force people would give you the VR goggles, and it was like you were there, like you're on the holodeck in Star Trek, you know. And so basically some of the memories that came back were literally in the VR, I was a different person, and experiencing whatever scenario happened to be there in a nightmare sequence. That's the thing that would come back. I find out it was just a holodeck trip, that
Yeah.
I'm remembering the trauma from the holodeck trip. So
Yeah. Now, one of the real issues that we're having with believability about SSP is if it happened in virtual reality and these people are bringing forward those stories, the public is saying, well, that was virtual reality, that wasn't real. But the neurological studies show the brain can't tell the difference. So I've been interviewing people that I know are telling VR stories. The way you tell the difference. The ones who were assaulted physically, the trauma is what's at the top, and they don't really have a lot of detail beyond it.
okay. Yeah.
The virtual reality people, all the details are there in glowing color. That's the main thing. Now, the other thing you need to look at is if you're the hero in your story, that's cover memory. And you need to learn to look beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
Because they don't use us as heroes in their space program. They use us as monsters.
Yeah.
We're soldiers. We're soldiers with psychic abilities. They don't use us to save people.
Mm-hmm.
And the public's getting really confused because you've got people telling all sorts of hero stories. Well, we went through and we saved blah, 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 blah. And we took them out into space. Well, I'm sorry, if you're saving someone and you're taking them out into the space program, you haven't saved anybody.
Nope. I'm
Because
glad
those,
you
those people are turned into cyborgs.
Mm-hmm. I'm
And
actually glad you brought this up because I've heard it time and again from different people, different clients. Oh, I did this, I saved this. I'm like, no, you didn't. No, you did not.
yeah,
It's really important. And when we talk about, again, when we individually were brought into these things generationally, because again, when you talk 20 years, that's a big generational
yeah,
jump of how things are done. But they oftentimes, and I don't know if I don't know, Penny, if you know about your lineage, your family history. Oftentimes, this is generational in a family line where this use and abuse is brought in. I will say that it's been in my family, and the two generations, let's say before me, would have been the era of the people that were fighting in, were young men and different ones fighting in World War II, let's say. And, I never believed, I was having a really hard time believing any of this until my father very innocently said something that made me want to crumble when we were outside talking to him, because he brought up something, about my grandfather that, it was said so innocently, but it confirmed everything that I had been told. And in general, what it was is that my grandfather was in the war and was basically, you would have just thought he was a grunt, D-Day grunt, do whatever. And he came home and he was a raving alcoholic. And a lot of men of those generations became raving alcoholics and everything. And, I didn't really have a very great relationship with me. He was just kind of this person and aside. I would even refer to him as uncle, not even grandfather or anything like that. And, I felt his, behavior in his life maybe wasn't kind, a bit destructive to his own family, let's say. My father was trying to, at that moment, relay that he really was a brilliant person. He was so brilliant and, so well respected that, Werner von Braun picked him out himself to come work on projects. it was an aside that was said that was so
Yeah.
innocent by my father, but it confirmed then everything that I knew. And again, I say that because later in conversations and channeling, finding out that it goes back even before that in other generations. So I bring up for some families that this is a generational kind of issue. And with what you say, turning into monsters, there's a genetic component of being able to do certain things,
Picking
right,
a
that
certain
would run
trait,
into
yeah.
a family. But I bring it up as well because we talk about generational issues. And I think back to how many people became alcoholics, right, big time after the war. And you think it's just the war. And always in my mind, I'm like, but what if some of the components from memory wipes or whatever didn't work well? I think back in that time, there was such direct threats made to individuals to be quiet, and it was literal and it was done. Like, I'm going to, wipe you out, wipe your entire family out. And again, as time moved on, methods got better. You know what I mean? That secrets were being.
My mother has alters. At least 3.
Mhm.
At least 2 of them hate me with a passion. It has created serious problems in my life and the life of my kids. She has managed, because the one altar is very smooth and has no idea she's done this. She has managed to completely alienate my entire family from me. She flat out lies. She has them convinced that I'm a welfare whore. And so they want nothing to do with me. I have been married and divorced twice, and I'm on my 3rd husband. And so she uses that as evidence that I'm a prostitute. She spread this through my entire biological family. I have one brother whose wife left him, and at that point, mom turned on him. And well, I also have another brother that she turned on when he was about 21. And I have 2 sisters that she thinks are saints. And she's in her 80s. There's no changing her.
Mhm.
So I have basically done the thank you, goodbye prayer. Thank you for your service. Go in peace. And I have nothing more to do with her. My sons will occasionally lapse and post a photograph of some family event where they've gone to my sister's house, and it's all of them with my mom. And they think I don't see it. And I know she's filling their heads full of nonsense. And she told me that when I write my book, that I'd better be careful what I say because she's going to sue me.
Right. Believe it or not, I have the exact same scenario running through my family as well, or at least I would say for me. You would all just different name, same kind of scenario
Same
from
dynamic.
that. And although my grandfather is from my father's side, not from my mother's side, which brings up another, I think, interesting component, because I've been kind of thinking about this a lot. I would like your perspective. When we talk about the grooming of a line that's going to be used, okay, the line's going to be used to be brought or tried to be used, that I really do believe that in that, let's say, grooming of a line, there is, let's call it outside interference to get certain people to hook up, to be married, to have children for genetic manipulation. And again, are then pulled out of it to be used within this. I say these
My
things.
parents were linked like that. They were deliberately sent to the same very tiny school, high school, out in the boonies. And both families were in the same cult. Both kids went to the same high school. And both family lines are Grail line.
I found it myself. I have one of my family branches off of the English King line. So yeah,
Yeah.
so I completely get it. Yeah.
My great grandfather, okay, I did my DNA after I was public, okay, because I had a medical problem and I needed the DNA proof that I had the medical problem or I wasn't going to be treated. And so I did the medical DNA at ancestry.com. And yes, I know BlackRock has it now. Okay. Whatever the CIA did to me before I was born, they already knew all about it. Okay. So I needed it for me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the things I did was I let them match me up with other ancestry users. I started getting contact from people at third cousin level who were members of European royal houses. Not the king or queen, but the cousins that were just about to be shifted off to the middle class, those folks. And I looked at this and I said, there's no way from my family tree that this should be happening. So I had to wait for 6 months of matchups to find out who didn't have an upline. Whose family was not matching up, that these other people were that family. And it turned out to be my father's mother's father. Apparently, he was born in England and adopted out to someone who worked for Crown Corporation, brought to America. This person who adopted him did not bother to teach him to read and write. His wife did after they were married. He was a 33rd degree Mason in Arkansas and then in Tulare County, California. My father, his grandson, told me, leave Grandpa Bill alone. He's evil. He's the most evil man I've ever known. Okay? Now, who would an English adoptee, orphan, have been blood related to that they would show up as in the cousin category to royal houses? The only logical assumption is that he was descended from one of Queen Victoria's sons. If it had been a daughter, they would have had to abort or keep. Since it was a son, they could just adopt them out. And Queen Victoria's girls all carried hemophilia. So he would have been born with hemophilia if it had been through a female line, and he wasn't. So thankfully, my line was spared that. We do have the pernicious anemia. So I am in the 95% certain category that he was a Windsor. So we have that. My father's people came through the Stuart line of Scotland. My mother's father's people came through the Bourbons of France. All of these are Grail lines.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Windsors married into the Stuarts, and their descending children were Stuarts. For all practical purposes, they just called them Windsors. So that's what we've got going here. And this is why my children had congenital adrenal hyperplasias, because their father was from the McCannon clan on the Isle of Man, and they were the guards of the O'Donnells, who were the kings at the time. And the guards and the younger daughters tended to get married because that was a reward to the guards, was to marry them into the family. That's a very time-honored kind of traditional thing. Your guards guard you better if you're blood kin.
Yeah, I actually came to find out that talking to a good friend of ours, he found out that he had some blood lineage. Well, he was wondering why he was having so many problems, both energetically and circumstantially. Came to
Mhm.
find out that he was related to a Cabal family by the name of Munso. Uh,
Mm.
and that found out that they were the ones that were trying to push their family agenda onto all the cousins and all the little branches and offshoots and everything. I came
Yeah,
to,
they do that.
yeah, and they enforce it to the death. And I found out there was somebody I knew that was related to the Campbell line. That I found out their ancestors, and this is where I discovered this. There was literally a branch of spirit. I nicknamed it the Beetlejuice layer because it's like the crust of, bottom of the toaster oven crust at the bottom, where these people were dictating to their lineage, even from over there, that of what that family member, that descendant was going to be doing in the here and now. And no other free will choice mattered. And when I found that out, I found stuff from my own ancestry that was doing it as well. And I found out how to divert that timeline. And
Well, first of all, the CIA and the Vatican have kept records of everyone born into a Grail line, ever. They have all of the abandoned babies that were adopted by somebody else. They have all of that. And they have tracked those people ever since there was a Vatican. Okay. The Pope became important when Clovis I, the Merovingian king, took over Gaul, and his several generations down grandson labeled it the Holy Roman Empire. The Merovingian Empire, the Frankish Empire, was in what today we call Belgium. But they set up the Vatican as mattering. They're responsible for that.
mm-hmm.
And the Vatican, because they can't have anybody more important than them survive, they've been trying to kill them off ever since. But so there's been this love-hate relationship between the royals, who are in Europe, they're all Merovingians.
Yeah.
Okay, you've got the Merovingians on one side, you've got the Vatican on the other side trying to kill them off. And now you've got the CIA coming in trying to surpass them all.
Mm-hmm.
The CIA at this point in time might as well be a country. They have their own resources, they have their own income, they have their own military. Excuse me. Sorry about that.
No, you're fine.
The CIA is beyond the control of Congress. It's beyond the control of the president. And I really worry for whoever Trump is putting in charge of them, because they're not going to listen to him because he's not one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think the whole crux of people are having a hard time following this conversation that I know that I wanted to bring out about it is first relating to how long this has been going on. I think people, again, those that may be starting to bring back memories, think things is more of a current present moment issue in the last few generations, instead of understanding this has been going on for 150, 200 plus years in specific.
Oh no, this has been going on since Sumeria.
Well,
Oh, of
right.
course.
What has changed
Right.
about the American Civil War time was it changed from being ETs doing this to us to being other humans doing it to us.
Correct. Now, I
That's the change.
completely agree. That's what we've said. This has been going on forever. When you talk about the secret space program component of it, that they have been grooming lines that they consider, I don't know, this is where sometimes we talk about a lineage curse. You're blessed to be in this lineage curse line, meaning that you are going to be looked at to be brought in to do service basically for them out of your free will. But it's been going on for generations and generations and generations. It is not new. It's just now people are bringing it up. They're starting to remember, but it's not new. And it goes, and again, my other point was to kind of go back to something we said a little bit earlier, why we both share an agreement that this isn't to be glorified. This is
No, this isn't.
It is not to be glorified, because if people really understood the big picture of it, they should be more horrified as to really what's been going on. And again, people can't imagine for how long some of this has been going on. Now, again, not to be in fear because it's coming out in conversation and everything, not to fear it, but to understand that there are reasons why persons like Chris and I, yourself or whatever, are not into being afraid. It's not about that, but understanding the level of technology they have to put in the cover stories to make you feel like you're glorified and have done something great, that you cannot even comprehend the technology because it's been going on so long that is really even out there for these things. We said, one time when we were talking privately, Penny, the one thing that I think, that I was glad to hear that you agreed with me, that I said, what, in all honesty, I don't want people to always remember this, because again, one of the things Chris and I have struggled with is it's important to get the information out, but we want to see people heal. And there's so many tripwires into that process being able to happen for somebody.
And I've hit plenty,
And that other people keep hitting, that it's hard for us to have some of these conversations about the secret space program, because we know all of these tripwires actually exist, how to get the community to fight against one another, to not be able to see the bigger picture. And then, you're left almost, again, eating your own, destroying your own, instead of being able to build a unity of wanting to get this information out, because it was designed that way, and, to keep that fighting going.
One of the biggest problems that I'm seeing, other than different generations had different tech used on them. Mm-hmm. That's one branch. The other branch is people who think it's glamorous, who want to be part of it. They have no memories whatsoever. They have no trauma, no PTSD, and they go pay someone who is less than honest, who takes their money and tells them what they want, what they think the person wants to hear. Yeah. And then that person goes public with that information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I have been on interviews with people who quoted me to me because I was their source for their information.
Mm-hmm. I've run into the same thing where I avoid this in my sessions like the plague. Whereas if I see that somebody's been in a program and they have not come to me asking me specific questions, like if they're not remembering something, like say if it hasn't come in a dream or something like that, if they haven't asked me poignantly if it was this, or if they feel they know this is this and they just want some kind of validation, want me to look. If it's not one of those situations, I don't even bring it up.
Good.
And I'm very strict on that now. The same goes with past lives. Mm-hmm. If somebody's just wanting to get into the session to see if they were some king or queen in the past lives, I fervently refuse it. because I will not glorify that, and I won't glorify the SSP stuff. So if somebody comes to me knowing that something's happened in a dream, or having a memory or something like that, which it usually goes from unconscious, subconscious, unconscious, conscious, it usually comes out. If that is happening,
if your higher self thinks you're ready, you will start getting dreams that aren't dreams. And I don't know how else to describe it, because they're not really a dream. And those are the ones that haunt you. And then it will up to flashbacks of the most traumatic, horrifying crap that you can possibly imagine. Some of mine have been beyond what I could imagine. And then you will finally get something like 3D validation. Now, for me, I had flashbacks for years of being nailed inside a wall as a child. The validation came when the NSA activated my memories of my mind fracture process. And yes, when the sexual abuse stopped working, they had a place in the wall that they would shove the child in and nail plywood over you and let you suffocate. And they would have it timed to the point where when you passed out, they would pull you out. So yeah, when my memories were activated, because I'd had these flashbacks, I believed the memories.
Yeah, if you're not already experiencing it, you shouldn't have some other psychic or somebody basically telling you what's what. If you require that, it's probably not time for you to look into this particular.
Exactly. I've had people come to me with dream after dream after dream after dream that they never took responsibility for it even possibly being a memory, but they wanted me to tell them what they did. Old phrase, homie, don't play that.
I that's synchronistic, because I've actually said that in sessions up in the past couple of weeks. So that's actually very synchronistic.
So you may feel the same way that I've always felt, because my whole thing, because again, brought up in trauma-based, brought up the trauma-based style, that, the one thing that I used to say to Chris early on is they just would never let me die. And,
oh God,
please just let me.
They let me die, and then they would put me in regen and bring me back.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yep.
So death was not an option.
Right, and this is the one thing that I think some people can't understand, and it's why it gets hard for me. You and I are commiserating right now, as we commiserated then, but we're doing it now on air, because, the trauma that you, God knows, you just wanted to die, just let me die, and they would never let me die. And so
I've been kind of in that mode since I got shot last July. Because I have had a dozen near-death experiences since 1984. And they were getting really frequent, and I kept being told, your job isn't done yet, you have to go back. But they wouldn't fix the body.
Right.
Yeah. I've run into.
I mean, and not only do you hurt going out, you hurt coming back in. And most people don't realize that. So it's like twice the pain of the death, going out and coming back. The body's not fixed. People expect because you're still alive that you didn't have anything. And meanwhile, you're having to deal with what killed you, because they don't heal you. They heal you just enough you're not dead. And you still have this mission to do, and they haven't told you what it is. And yeah, there are days it's like, why can't I just go?
Right.
Yeah.
And again, people don't I understand exactly what you're saying, you know what I mean? But I certainly can see also where other people could not understand that kind of thought processes. And we're not talking suicidal. We're not talking anything
Yeah,
like
I'm
we're,
not suicidal. It's
yeah,
just, if I'm going to keep dying, why can't I stay dead?
right. Why can't I hold on to something that I can control better and that I can have more fun at?
Yeah.
I think some of it is, you know, moving beyond the understanding of life and death. And, you know, also knowing there's a bigger picture here. Really, your soul doesn't die. It can go in a new body. It can do whatever. For the love of God, when do I get to control it? You know what
Yes,
I
and
mean?
all
The last time was about a year and a half ago, and I ended up in Elysium, the ancient Greek version of heaven.
Mhm.
I was there. I was happy. There were people who loved me there. Until two archangels showed up, one on each side, dragged my ass out of there with me kicking and screaming. I don't want to go. You have a job to do, you're going to do it. And they plopped me back into my body, and one of them turned and pointed his finger at me and said, "Stay," like
Mhm.
I was a dog.
Yeah.
I mean, adding insult to the actual injury of, you got to be here.
Yeah, I personally have run into variations of this as well. Like when one of an abduction scenario I was in, where not only from my accident that happened in 2009, I had a near-death experience there too. I was in 2 weeks
Mm.
spirit world, came back, and I was clinically dead for an hour. And I even had the sheet over me and everything. And I popped up like a jack in the box and scared the crap out of several firemen that were right there.
I
Uh,
bet.
they're like, "Ah!" But with
The first time I came back, the doctor says, "What the hell? I guess she's going to make it."
yeah, and everybody's just looking at me going, "Huh." I even got a round of applause for living, apparently, but by several people. And my own grandfather, who'd been gone since 1984, was standing right next to me, in spirit, right there. Later on, what pisses me off about some certain scenarios is, I have injuries from this.
I bet.
Things out there. I have knee injury, back injuries, head injuries, things of that nature. You have beings out there fully capable of resetting the clock back prior to the accident. I've seen the technology
Yes.
myself. They will not do it because of some contract they have out there. They won't do it. And I ran into a scenario where there was a military commander and an ET. The ET wanted to heal me completely. The military commander argued and said, "You will reset him back to the point of that accident." And I turned to this guy and said, "How freaking dare you?" And I said, "You will do as I say, and I'm telling you to heal me. This person's in the right, you are not." And this person gave me this "fu" look, and that's where I remember the memory being. But that was, so I found out that was from an abduction scenario where I had gotten injured in transit, and they just reset me to the spot I'm at now. They didn't actually, or then I should say, and not reversing the accident injuries or reversing any other health conditions arising from the microwave weaponry and all this other stuff. They won't reverse it. And I was told that, yeah, there are not necessarily blockades in the way, but there are complications with not only our government, but there's complications with the Galactic Federation as well. So it's like you have these two sides of this yin yang going on. I don't particularly care about the politics, and I don't particularly care about the contracts or whatever the hell it is. If you have the capability, use it. That's for good. So
Well, I have had archangels raise me from the dead, and then I would tell them, "Why can't you fix me?" And I got told that my personal medical history was too well documented, and that if they actually fixed what was wrong with me, that the government would come get me and that I would disappear into some lab,
yeah.
never to be seen again.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah.
That almost made sense, knowing what I know about the American government.
It makes sense. I was told something very similar, that I was told there was like, I've been talking to beings from different worlds and different dimensional spaces that are quite capable of coming here, speaking to us face to face, and then I could go there and speak to them, interact with them. I said, what would be the issue of me going back and forth? They said exactly what you were just saying. They said, for one, you would have to be conditioned to come here vibrationally and also health wise. And we would literally have to reverse every single thing wrong with you. I said, I'm perfectly in favor of that. What's the problem? They said, you coming back.
Yeah.
Because your own government would target you mercilessly, and they would not stop because they would wonder how you got completely healed. And that would be far worse than if you completely were staying the way you are now. And it's like, yes, that does make sense to me, but that doesn't mean I'm not pissed about it. So that
Exactly.
I completely understand. It doesn't mean I agree with it. So let's
I
just,
don't like it. And, I'm I've had various entities. Some are physical, some are interdimensional, come in and fix little things. I've had, because when they took me, they would put me through regeneration to actually put me back in the shape I'm in after a mission. I would be perfectly healthy, 25 years old for a 60 and back, and come back and I'm in my 60s and I'm overweight and I'm damaged, and they put me exactly back on purpose. And once in a while, the tech would fix something little. And that one little thing would make such a difference in my actual quality of life here.
yeah, I've done the same thing where now one time, like with my knee, it got completely screwed up when I got hit by the car. It was an '84 Mercury, I believe it was. Big hunk of steel and iron, and it
Yeah.
broke my right leg. I had to have a bar put in there. I was wearing cleat-like shoes that adhered to the asphalt, so it snapped my leg when the car hit me,
Ooh.
and forming a new joint. But what ended up happening when I got on the person's windshield who was texting, he hit the brake, catapulted me forward. I hit the left knee on the pavement. He was going 40 miles an hour when he hit me. So when he hit the brake, I then was going 40 and hit the pavement. And the knee tendons all teared. And when I eventually got that to where it was, I have had issues with that the left side, the left leg ever since. The right one, though the bar is in there, it's actually manageable. The left one has been giving me the most shit, basically. And I basically told the people in these programs, reverse this, what they do, and also the ETs I run into periodically. What they do is, one time it was totally off kilter to the point where I couldn't walk on it. This was back when I lived
Yeah.
in.
When I saw you in July, you were walking.
Yeah, it was off then, and we had a healer come in, and he took it to the stage it was where it could be put back. He even made the statement to me at the time. He goes, I am not being allowed to take it 100%, to the point where it's 100% usable only before the major screw up. And that's when I got mad.
I can see that. Yeah.
And I said, why? And he kept telling me, you'll eventually figure this out. Well, I figured it out and I'm still pissed about it. So it's like, they fixed this to the extent where it was just put back, and they've done this 2 or 3 more times to where it was out and they put it just back. They like to put it just back. And every single time, it may majorly screw up. It might go maybe halfway the way it had been done. But the way you saw me at the conference was literally just after they just put it back again. Humpty Dumpty got super glued back together back to that particular point. And it aggravates me to no end. And I'm being told that this is like the middle ground compromise to where, okay, you might get harassed a little bit, but you're not dead. And then if you were to get 100%, you'd be dead. If they saw you were 100% and could take them on 100%, they would then come at you with the full fury of what they have, And I'm thinking, even though this makes sense to me, 100%. I don't care. So I'm at that stage myself. I always see, well, we should be able to completely heal ourselves, especially if you have a high psionic capability. You should be able to regenerate organs, regenerate limbs, all this other stuff. I've attempted to do this myself and rewrite my own timelines to accommodate this to where we wouldn't get blowback. Somebody out there is able to countermove me as I'm doing this.
Yes, there's somebody out there that's countermanding me. I have been locked in battle, psi battle. That's PSI for the audience. I have been locked in psi battle with someone who works for WEF.
Mhm. Okay.
I have been locked in battle with this person for longer than I have been public. And every time I weaken up even a tiny bit, because of health issues, he takes full advantage of it. And I know it's a him. I've seen his face.
Mm-hmm.
If he walked into the conference, I would know him.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I'm not strong enough to completely stop him. So we're kind of locked into, I'm not letting him do his thing, but he's not letting me win either.
Yeah, it's more of a weird stalemate, and this is something I've personally run into. But I've been looking for plethoras of solutions to solve like this riddle. I nicknamed it the riddle of the wheel because or the eternal Rubik's cube because the whole riddle of the wheel meaning like a hamster wheel where it's constantly
Yeah,
you go
that's
and
what it feels like. Is you're on a hamster wheel and you're just using up all of your energy and accomplishing nothing.
But and also, I found out you can actually put that whole wheel into a hypothetical psionic box and have them make you think that you're still running the wheel while you're operating and running solutions in another area as well. And you can do this on multi dimensions. And I've tried this, and I've actually made progress in healing myself and also changing the timelines around myself. It is possible, but you have to
Be
give like a
careful
200.
Be
Yeah.
careful about changing timelines or you will have the time core down on you.
I've already met a member of Time Core in the flesh, so yes.
Oh, you've met two of us at least.
Yeah, when we were in Arizona, nobody has been told this yet on one of these shows. We were in Arizona. We were in Prescott Valley at the time, a little neighborhood called Granville. One of the weirdest neighborhoods, silent during the day, no noise, no, it was weird energy wise. And ironically, we were on a street called Willoughby. I always say last stop Willoughby, like Twilight Zone. We were in the Twilight Zone there. I nicknamed this, people forgot the joke. But when we were there, I came walking into the living room. I see this person standing there, mostly full body. I could kind of see sunlight through them a little bit,
Mm.
kind of holographic. And they basically said they were operative of Time Core and they were attempting to get me to spout out to the public a particular narrative, and all this person got back was the middle finger. So I was like, I said, no, I am not doing this. Oh no, you actually altered this, so therefore, I'm like, nope. And it was a holy hellfire was raining down on me.
Yeah, it's time core can be very much like the Adjustment Bureau.
Yeah, I remember that movie and also Loki season 2. If people know about the TVA in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that's pretty dead on as well. When you see them snipping and pruning timelines and things of that nature, that is damn accurate to them.
So
Yeah, that is.
so one of the things that we have a hard time with some of these conversations, Penny, is because, we've been trying to say that we know as people have these memories come up that a storyline has been developed of how they want the information to come out and the story they want to come out with the information about secret space program, the history of it, all of this stuff, which is not going to be what actually happened, but it's going to be a story that will benefit, of course, people who are in charge, who want to stay in charge, and they don't want to look like the monsters that they actually are. And so obviously we do not want to participate in that conversation. However, we don't want to scare people either. But, anyone who is choosing a path of trying to provide a bigger piece of information obviously runs into problems with all kinds of people. But I put that out there because, this is, I think, very hard to actually explain to the general public as a whole. And like what you've said earlier today, people with what's coming back to them, you don't really know exactly what it is that's coming back to them. Is it a cover story? Is it something really real? Is it
Virtual reality
that you're supposed to be divulged, bringing
Divulging to the
out
public, yeah.
in order to promote that storyline that they want to come out? That it's a very complicated, issue. And again, we understand as well that the people that are involved in all this, they themselves may be quite innocent, not know maybe that they've been programmed and broken to participate in a certain way, or be programmed and broken to cause some of the havoc that keeps, everybody fighting and eating themselves. And that, there is a component of people that are more than willing to participate in it in a certain way, for whatever their experience they want to be, and how complicated all of this is.
To cut to my motivation. I was a truther when I first came online. I was not in anybody's pack. I was just investigating things. I was disabled. I was online. I'm a researcher by nature. I'm what they used to call an Asperger's. So that if you wonder about why I do certain things, it's probably related to that. My brain works differently than normies.
Mhm.
I describe myself as being a female Sheldon from Big Bang Theory. So that's what I am. Flowery language tends to confuse me, so I tend to be blunt, direct, and to the point. Okay, I was a truther, and I had been working with the public in retail, and I had let my doctor put me on an SSRI, and I was numb. And I was still having the flashbacks and the nightmares. And one day I told him I wanted to get off him, and he said no. So I went off him cold turkey. And I reached out to a Facebook friend to be my support person. And he was okay with that. He had been going through a divorce, so it was kind of like, having a friend was not a bad thing. And I told him, I'm with Lou. This isn't a romantic thing. And he was like, okay, so you're a safe person. And we talked, and he claimed he was a former NSA person, and that he was doing, that he was writing plays. He was working on a book. So he was retired. And after we talked for a few months, he said, you hate DC so much. Why don't you come see me and I'll give you a tour of the place? And he paid for the trip, so I went. And while I was there, I think he thought he was activating the altar, but he had been given the code word to activate the memories of the altar. And they came in this big, horrific lump. And they were in German. which Penny doesn't speak German real well. I speak it like a 4-year-old at best.
Mm-hmm.
I understand a lot of what I hear. I can read it half decently, but the words don't come really well. And I can't remember noun genders, so I fuck up all the articles. Sorry about that. You can bleep my F-bomb.
Now you're fine.
But I spent 3 solid years going through that lump of memories to figure out what I remembered, what was real, what was my overly emotional reaction to what appeared to be real, tried to put it in some sort of a timeline so that I would know basically what year what happened. And some of it had cover memories. And I developed my own way of dealing with it. Okay, I do self-hypnosis as a way to calm and de-stress. And what I do is I slide into a self-hypnosis state and I ask the subconscious to open the curtains, because I'm treating it as a theater show.
Mm-hmm.
Open the curtains and show me what really objectively happened. I'm not asking for anything to be deleted. I want the original cover memory to still be there so I know what it was. But I want to know what actually happened. And I just sit there watching from the outside, and I see the players, and I see the action, and I feel what I, as the person there, thought and felt. So I get the full story from my first person perspective. That doesn't mean it's necessarily the only perspective, but I get it. And that way I get what happened. And you kind of have to be dissociated to do this, which is, I wish I didn't have to be mind fractured to learn dissociation, but it's a really good skill to have when you want it. It's just not a good place to unpack and live. So, but I went through each and every one of those memories to find out what really happened. And I know most of the other speakers out there are not doing that.
I agree. Yeah, it's difficult. Yeah, I've done the same. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
But I did a lot of research. You talked about it at the beginning that you weren't listening to other people because you didn't want to contaminate your own. I know Tony has taken that approach, Tony Rodriguez. He and I have been friends since before we were both public. But I know he took that approach. He didn't listen to anybody. But I'm looking at this lump of stuff in German. And there are raptors in it. There are grays in it. There are 12-foot tall reptiles in it, speaking German fluently. And I'm sitting there in my living room trying to figure out, where could this possibly have happened? So yeah, I went through all of the available stuff. I went back to Michael Relf. He's the first person who came forward about American military on Mars. And he did it through muscle testing.
Okay.
So, okay. I don't say bad things about muscle testing. I have used muscle testing.
Yeah.
People have accused me of being a clone, and my muscle testing says no, I'm still in my original body. So I have gone to great lengths to figure out where it happened, when it happened, who it was with. And over the years, I've reintegrated that altar as best I can. She sits there and calls me a wuss.
Yeah, I have one that does the same. So yes.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah, she and I have an understanding that she's not allowed to kill anybody.
Yeah. Yeah, mine, I every now and again, if I'm whining about something, the other one comes in and goes, "Would you stop it?" Stuff like that.
Chris, if you don't mind real quick, for
Yeah.
those people who may not know what you're talking about, can you guys define in your understanding what you think an altar is? What does that mean?
In my experience, it's could also be created from the fragmented memories of being over there, but then there could in the SSP, but there also could be another version of you on another timeline, a fragmentary, even like somebody that sat in the Montauk chair, they were projecting out to other time frames. There could be another fragmentary timeline.
That's kind of complicated.
Yeah, it's extremely complicated.
My understanding is very simple. When you take a child, small child, usually below 7, some kids can still do it at 12. You take a small child, you put them through a trauma that their mind cannot accept. If they decide to live, they form a bubble around that memory.
Yes. Okay.
And that bubble is separate. It is the child says, this is no longer me. This is this bubble over here. This holds this trauma. So it no longer happened to me. Well, depending on how much energy they put into that bubble, it can become a person of its own sitting inside your head.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It forms its own personality. It forms its own memories. It forms its own ideas. It starts off with the same talents and abilities that you do. So it is what you would be like if you had those experiences.
Okay.
So
Yes.
I think when we were
It's a what Native Americans call it is a soul fragment.
right.
Yeah, soul shard, soul
What we
fragment,
would
yeah.
say, what we said earlier, years ago, because we started this in 2017, we would talk about blowing a shard.
Yes.
We would talk about something in that way and it seems to be able to take a life of its own, basically.
It has part of your chi in it. So of course it has its own life.
Yes, it's exactly like if you've seen, again, I use Marvel Cinematic Universe as a good starting point or an example. The character of Moon Knight. You have the character of Mark Spector, then you have the character of Stephen Grant, and you find out Mark Spector, when he was a child, manifests this other alter named Stephen Grant because his mother was a drunk and abusive to him. So he created Stephen, who didn't remember any of the abuse. He was actually the more innocent personality. But Mark is the soul. He becomes a soldier. He becomes, like soldier of fortune after a while. And then you find out that Stephen is his alter through the whole thing. And there's a third alter that pops up while he's doing battle with somebody. All of a sudden he blacks out whenever another alter takes over. And his wife's standing there going, "What happened?" It's a third alter that was far more violent and far more brutal because Mark didn't want to be brutal. So therefore, he was more like Stephen in that respect. He had more bond with Stephen. So
it's his evil alter ego was actually shot off as another personality.
Yeah, and it was that's another personality becomes an assassin in the storyline. So it's
That's what happens to us.
Yeah.
They take this small child and they start off with sexual assault. They are raping small children in every body opening. That's how they create these altars. So when you hear some pedo somewhere saying there's no evidence that sex with a small child does them any harm, you can throw this at them. That is what causes this multi-personality disorder.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they use to create us.
Mm-hmm.
I was 4 years old, and I was being raped daily, sometimes multiple times a day, by adult men at 4 years old. That's what does this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's not demons, it's not possession. It's a natural survival mechanism that humans have so that when crap happens to little kids, they can survive it.
Mm-hmm.
And I have been subjected to 104 exorcisms by irrational church people who could not understand that this was scars of trauma, and they assumed it had to be demon possession. And like I told you before we started recording, if I had $1 for every idiot that called me a demon, I could buy a house.
Well, that, and you brought up something else, which I think is also, so when you're, again, we call it always blowing a shard of yourself. When you're blowing a shard of yourself, which can energetically take a life of its own, meaning you may not be able, you know, to see it. It's not born, it's not standing there, but there is an energy there now. And that energy basically could be haunting you, meaning
You haunting you.
you know, you haunt me.
It's part of you.
Yeah, and it's like you said, how you said you had altars calling you names, and you had all of this stuff, because it's not a reflection of who you consider yourself to be. It's something else that is actually, again, the result of the trauma, but it's not necessarily something that looks back at you, you know what I mean, in general, that says, wow, what a lovely little girl. It's actually something that can be totally different, that, again, a component that's utilized.
The altar that calls me a wuss had an entire 55-year existence all on her own in this body while they had me asleep. So she isn't me. The best we can do is share memories. She still has her attitudes. She still has her voice patterns. She sometimes takes over my body, and you will hear my accent change. She has learned to speak English since the time that we've been working on reintegration. She has a really soft Schwabish accent. That's the same accent that Arnold Schwarzenegger has.
Mm.
Hers is a little softer. It's not as in your face. But you'll hear me slide into that because I've shifted altars. And depending on whether she takes full control or is still being nice and sharing, I may or may not remember what she says.
Okay.
Which has created tremendous problems in my personal life.
True, and that was something, believe it or not, during the conference, your husband and I were commiserating about, because we were talking about how we knew a change was occurring in respective, partners, and for me, it's like, as I said to him, and I've told Chris, it's like the vocals that are getting ready to come out of your mouth, the words that are getting ready to come out, it's like I know them by heart now. It's like a repeat pattern of behavior, a repeat pattern of even verbiage that's used, or this repeat pattern, you know what I mean? And so anybody who is with somebody who's having these issues, I commiserate. I know others that would commiserate, and it really does happen. And I think, again, people do not understand the totality of the complications surrounding these programs and surrounding what was done to people and surrounding the creations of these, shards, alter ego, whatever you want to call them, and the complications that it actually brings back into a person's life, especially when the goal is now, in my opinion, how do you heal it? How do you heal the trauma? Because to me, the best success is
that's a good lead in. Lou, my partner, is an Iroquois shaman. And we have been using shamanic soul fragment retrieval techniques. Since we both have psi abilities, we come to a telepathic kind of a half merge where we're seeing the same astral situation. And so he's with me while I do this. And I call forth the next fragment that wants to be reintegrated. And he scans to make sure it's actually one of me and not an opportunistic entity or fragment out there. And then I bring it in and we kind of sit. The mental image is we're on a park bench sitting next to each other, and we gradually get closer until we become one.
Mm.
And at that point, our memories start to merge, and they don't have to take over the body to be able to experience life. Sometimes the merge is complete. I have some alters that have basically disappeared. Their memories are there. Their functions are there. It's not like they died, but more like they've completely merged back into me. Then there are others like Lieutenant Valkyla, who she's not real comfortable with me. She sees me as weak because she was a German officer. So she sees me as weak, and she sees me as allowing people to walk on me, which does happen, and she's not happy about that. And her scolding me, telling me I'm a wuss, is her attempts to get me to stand up for myself. But I've also seen how violent she can get when she's in charge, and I don't want to go there.
Yeah,
So
the one that's popped up for me, and I didn't realize completely that this was a thing until I met somebody on Zoom that I never saw the person's face. Anytime this person attempted to get their camera to work, there was some interference. So I never actually saw the person's face, but there was a problem that had popped up. One of my legs felt like I had been shot in my left leg. Again, it was the left leg. And this muscle was just hurting really horribly bad. And this kept getting worse, kept getting worse, kept getting worse. And eventually this dream popped out to where I'm in Russia in some war-torn area. And this person that I've been talking to on Zoom for over a year, that I never saw his face, was there as some mercenary or something. And I get into a shootout with this guy. He shoots me in the leg. It was the alter memories bleeding through, affecting my physical body into an actual etheric wound, which was becoming a physical one. When I realized the origin point of where it came from, it disappeared. And as soon as I called the person's name out that actually did the deed, it actually disappeared. And the reason I wasn't being allowed to see the person's face, the forest people told me this, and other beings like Isaac and them told me this, is because if I had seen the person and looked him in the face too early, it would have caused me brain damage, bringing that back in too quickly. My brain would have tried to bring it in too fast, and my physical body would have manifested too quickly, and it would have been bad. But it was partitioned out over a year period, and it and it came in the way it was supposed to. But that version of me can speak fluent Russian and carries around a Russian rifle. And I'm like, I don't remember learning Russian, but also can speak fluent German. And it doesn't carry an accent, has an American accent, but can slip into the German and Russian language, and can read both languages too. The thing of it is, also carries high psionic capabilities. So if I try to hit a certain level, when I'm doing a healing or something, I shouldn't say healing, but doing a session or doing a clearing, and if I'm running into a problem, I will hear a voice saying, basically, again, calling me a wuss, like, would you stop whining about this and get it done? Stuff like that, I'm like, where the hell are you coming from?
Same attitude that Lieutenant Valkylin has.
And I'm like, where?
Stop piddling around and do it.
Yeah, and I'm like, and I'm sitting here in my office. If somebody saw me go, would you shut up? And somebody be like, who the hell are you talking to? That's exactly what's happened. And it's slowly integrating. And I feel like, I'll look at something Russian or something German, and I'll be able to temporarily read what it says. I never learned Russian or German in this version of me. So I sometimes can read it, and I will see it as English temporarily, like a universal translator.
Yes.
And
that's the biggest problem that I have with talking to ETs is I hear them in English.
I hear them completely in English, and they could be speaking some weird sounding language, and I hear them in English. My brain translates every channel, every being that talks to me telepathically into English. And I was told I was born with that ability. That's why it's one of the things that was being exploited and by the programs. It was a high propensity of psionic capability. And I hear all the beings in English, and they assure me they are not speaking English. So
I have a question for you. If you can do that, are you hearing the telepathic internet?
Yes, the V2K, I hear it.
No, the telepathic internet.
Oh, the AI personality that actually.
No, there is a telepathic internet of all of the high-level telepaths on this planet.
Okay, now I know exactly what you're referring to. I haven't heard it by that name, but yes, I have heard people either sitting in a chair, somebody's somewhere strapped in, or they are sitting in some room tied into the internet in some way. Yes, I hear the voices constantly.
What I get a visual, but it's a cover. I see them like it's a tea party in Tudor England, and they're sitting around at these tables and they're eating and they're dressed period costumes, and I come in dressed. I like to shock them, so I come in like a flapper from the 1920s.
No.
And they're talking about all of these things, and they're so prim and proper, and it shows up in my hearing as almost Shakespearean English. But I grew up reading King James Bible, so Tudor English makes sense to me.
Mine's in more of a Star Trek-y type situation where it's like a space station or something like that, where they will try to make me think that sometimes they're a galactic group when in fact it's this group of people.
These are humans.
Yeah, they're humans. They make me think they're galactics, but
so
they're
the
not.
One thing that, I've seen, maybe you guys can tell me then what I'm seeing, because I've seen something totally different. I don't know how to describe it. Think of a huge, because I swear, let me think how many people I think would be around it. Maybe 10 people around it. It's almost like a spool, because in the center of it comes out wires and comes out whatever. But you have these chairs, and people go in and out of sitting in those chairs, literally. And then they're out there, you know what I mean? They're utilizing AI somehow. They're interacting with whatever. I think they're searching to find out who is tuning in, and they're interacting with them for influencing or whatever. But what I see is literally people doing shifts, and I call them shifts because I don't know what else to do with it. It's my turn now to sit in the chair. So it's not I've seen before where there's been abuse, where people are hooked into a chair until their life is sucked out of them. That's not what this is. This is something else as well. So I don't know if either one of you have ever seen anything like that, but it's very weird.
No,
But
I haven't, but I haven't looked for it either.
it
So,
just showed up. It just sometimes I get these
showed-
when I weird kind of vision things that are going on, and
I was invited to the telepathic internet. They were surprised that I was capable of it because I'm Rh positive. So this was a bit of a shock to them that I was capable of it. And that's part of why I show up dressed differently. But they discuss world events and what's planned.
Yeah, there's a lot of them hooked up to this. Now I know what exactly you're referring to. I've encountered this before. They haven't bothered me lately. So
Okay.
it hasn't been like anytime recent. It maybe like it was about the times leading up to the conference I was hearing them yammering, but then afterwards it revved up and then it stopped for a little while, and I haven't heard that particular group for a little while.
Okay.
But V2K is the one that's been bugging me. But it's
You're wearing a blocker cap. That should help.
oh yeah.
But your cap should be covering your ears.
I have a stocking cap one as well. So
Okay.
yeah, and I use this a lot. I was told though that sometimes if you do it too much, you reduce your immunity to build up to be able to not hear it without it. And that's one of the things a couple of the galactic groups told me. To
Well,
not wear it forever. Don't keep it on forever and ever. But
I kept mine on long enough that they stopped targeting me with it.
mhm.
And I have been wearing it when I hear the tinnitus.
Oh yeah, and we also make pieces. We make tower busters that also create a jamming field for V2K, and it's a specific kind of one that we make.
I
Uh,
have this.
oh yeah.
It sits next to my computer. I have it over there because when it was right here, it was too loud.
Mm. You even had an orb pass next to you as you were holding that. I can feel the energy from that. Even though you have a filter on, right in front of it, there was an orb that passed in.
I
Yeah.
I don't have a filter on.
Oh, you no, I mean the space background, I should say, not a filter.
Oh, that's just
Yeah.
that's because I live in a small apartment and I have too much stuff. I'm not a hoarder. I just have too much stuff for the available size.
Okay. Yeah. I felt the energy of that pyramid. It looks like it's doing pretty good
Yeah.
job.
Yolanda made that.
Ah, interesting. Yeah, I make all of our pieces as well. So I'm thinking this is the time where we get into the channel. I think we've gone pretty good today. So I'm thinking
Okay.
we can go into that. Mhm. Let me see here.
Tell him not to divulge my secrets.
no, that's not.
No, no,
I do have areas of my world that I keep
We
private.
don't do that.
no, we don't
Okay.
do that. I just heard Isaac say, hadn't thought of it till just this moment. No, he's joking. So it's like when he says things like that, he's just screwing around and trying to make people laugh. So it's like no.
Okay.
Um, uh, Basically, his name etymology means "he who laughs." So that's
Yes.
no. So are you actually coming in, or are you just going to stand there and be creepy? Okay, let me see. I physically see him, so when he peers through the wall, he's pulled practical jokes, everything on me. So yeah, I equate him to the character of Drop Dead Fred from that movie from the 90s. So
I know that character.
yep, kind of like a mix between clown and Loki-ish type of character. Yeah.
Well, you're in luck. I like Loki.
Uh, so Isaac, if you're going to be the one talking today, my name Benevolent Isaac. It's true. Yes, this is Isaac. I had no lie here, being transparent at the moment. I had trepidations for himself being on this call here because of triggering of different memory types that had to do with the manipulation of timelines himself, not only with Montauk, but time core related type of situations. To say I was perturbed at him bringing any of this back was an understatement, because not any slam against himself, but of the blowback factor that follows. Things that could be out of my own control to assist with, and others that are around him. This has nothing to do with any person here. This has to primarily do with some of those that he sometimes thinks he has the capability of dealing with. We assist. He does a lot of legwork. We assist in this legwork as well. And there are many of. In this, I happen to be a member of his soul family. So if you saw me, I would look like him, just 7 feet tall and with red hair. So with that said, I too was put into programs. And I can see also when he has had an altar in play. Now, many people think that you can just wink an altar out of existence. This is a common belief right now. And I've said this before in other programs where we talked about altars. Can you unwrite one? Yes. Can you have the memories of those altars? Yes. A good example would be Star Trek Discovery, where there was a Klingon agent that took the form of a human and took the memories from that human so they could form an altar. Then the Klingon personality dies. The human altar then has also the memories of the original, but also the memories of the human. This can occur, and even the PTSD to go with it. This can occur and has occurred. In the case of himself, is this a dangerous practice to bring back memories, even as a useful practice? Yes, from seeing, therefore memory can be triggered. Sometimes it's as simple as that, sometimes it's very complex. But in his case, what he sees and what he remembers is his brain is highly redundant and can remember on multiple levels. This is how some galactic groups work as well, because of some of his galactic ancestry. So he gains some of this. Now, in his case, the altar it's not necessarily anywhere but on a fragmentary timeline, meaning that I'm not saying this is something that his clients will be worried about. No, this is something that is actually a blobbish memory that has no effect on any sort of healings or any sort of or repair work or trench work. It's just something that's annoying. Now, I'm saying this for him as well. For a general audience, this can be a situation where you believe you're being haunted and are being possessed, when in fact, it is you haunting you. This is a clue that you've had a trauma, as you said, Penny, in another part of your life that you have buried. The burying process often births an alternate. In this particular process, the unburying can often aid in merging, but if they are two completely different people, it's like, again, your Moon Knight, with the Stephen Grant and the Mark Spector and the third one. They were three vastly different ways of thinking that do not belong merged. Can you uncreate an altar that you don't actually bring the memories back at all? Yes, that is also your Star Trek Lower Decks with your character that had the eyepiece, where there were two of him, where the original just elected to die. And the new one, Rutherford, the character Rutherford with the eyepiece, was the one that actually broke the family curse by being a better person and not haunted by the memories of the past. This can happen. That was a dead-on, accurate altar situation showed in that show. Now, I do not need to blab on too long, but I can actually go into questions if you like.
So from your perspective, from where you stand and other contributors out there that you've talked about this with, I am curious about when we talk about these altars, and we've talked about it, obviously how they get formed or whatever. But when you look at people in general that have come back and are starting to have maybe memories come through, and again, they could be real memories, the planted memories or whatever. How many people are really then going to be affected by potentially multiple altars?
Multiple altars, let's say on your guys's level, not a lot, but altars, one, maybe two, many. This, some of the ones that had to do with the program, you'll find multiple layers, especially when you have multiple 20 backs, things of that nature, and tons of tragic events, just like, the sex abuse, all of this. And also integrated, think about this for a minute, the VR section of this, where you have a holographic reality. Say if you have something hook up to your head when you've been hooked up to virtual reality or a holodeck, they have the big open room too. Or like in your X-Men where you had the training room. It's something like that. What does this reflect? Your personality. They had this in your Stargate SG-1 where Teal'c was hooked up to one of these, and the virtual reality of the game he was playing was starting to reflect his subconscious. This actually then breeds an alternate in the holographic VR. This is where AI comes into play. You can literally create an AI personality this way as well. So the percentage, getting back to the original premise of the question, the percentage for large amounts of alters is actually quite low. And that's more indicative of the programs, at least from what I've seen. Anybody that is also more so psychically sensitive, but anybody building up those traumas could form an alternate. They had that silly movie, Me, Myself, and Irene years ago, where it was based on an alternate where it shared memories. Goofy movie set in the haha format, after my own heart, pretty much, for the comedy factor. But this happened to be a true creation of an alter. Can the timeline be brought back and put back? It can, but it is tricky. Think of encoding, decoding. If you have also in the SSP, and you have a 20 back where you've been reinserted, but you've been also going parallel, and you're quantumly entangled to that parallel you for a moment. Think about this for a moment. Two brains that have encoded and decoded differently. You bring this back, the memories start to come back. What does it do to your brain here? It starts to encode it similarly to there. What then does this create? Can bring in a mirror self from over there. There are multiple factors. This is why the multiple fragmentary alters from an SSP trip. Now, a regular person having a trauma, like the character of Moon Knight or Mark Spector, because of his alcoholic mother in that respect, that is somebody that would be extremely sensitive to be able to create these alters. And most of them are subconscious and you wouldn't know it anyway. But you wouldn't have the thousands of them. The thousands of them are indicative to people in the programs, even though a lot of many people were thrown into the programs. Within that multitude of tons of people, from alien abductees to SSP, then there is a fragment of them that have created these multiple alters as a result of going through those particular traumas. Now, there is a bit of a sci-fi turn, if this wasn't enough, where then an alter, if you were, say, in a program such as Montauk, where you're in the chair, or some similar type program, you could literally, from the trauma that imposes on your body and on your mind, could then lock and alter personality into a timeline fragmentary. That can also cause a great different set of problems, especially with you looking at you. You could literally form a temporal branch that has that set of memories on it that have literally created its own fragmentary that it could exist on. Now, can aliens create another timeline to where it's only you on there and they can abduct you that way? Yes. That's not exactly what I'm talking about. When you're in a situation like, say, Montauk, or you were, I should say, and it this alter is, say, created by yourself, with a high psionic field can then plant itself in that other frequency that you've tapped into and become almost like a ghost. Some people call it poltergeist, but people can also take abilities that they've suppressed. Like the character of Credence from your Fantastic Beast movies, where he had such trauma that his trauma was his weapon, but it was also killing him inside. And it was like a poltergeist, shadowy entity. In the case of a poltergeist, somebody could be haunting their own space, and that then battles them for supremacy of a space. And then they think some demon is haunting them. He has seen this before, long ago and recent, but he's also seen real entities as well. Now, one more tiny point I will make. If you have that situation where it's you haunting you, there are some details that will stand out. You will be in a situation where not only do external entities take advantage of this, from ghost to demon to God knows what, will see it as a wound and try to take advantage of this. But you could have an altar that could be calling out to things. But also a telltale sign is that your life tends to be kind, circle the toilet at times, and you think that somebody else is co-creating this. It is your own path you're walking that is co-creating and undoing what you believe you are doing. This is a telltale sign that you may have an altar sitting in your subconscious or in the ethers, which is still a projection of here. So, I hope this answers it to the best of my ability.
Yeah. Do you have any questions, Penny?
I'm trying to unpack all that. So, I'm pretty sure that I have been dealing with mostly altars that are obvious as altars, and I've been having other things in my life since I was a child. Part of my psi ability was to be able to see in other dimensions, overlapping, which was difficult because my father couldn't and assumed I was lying. And so I've been navigating a multidimensional world for a long time.
Yes. He does the same. They like to label this with a disease name like Asperger's and autism and things of that nature. When sometimes there's some alien experimenting from the ancient past going on, but also you have sensitivity to these dimensional layers that everything everywhere is happening all at once. And you are seeing all of this in tandem. He sees this, he sees parallel universes, which again, as you were saying off recording, you have the timelines that have the branches like the Archangel tree. Then you have other big world lines that are wrapped around as the rest of the trunk you see in the roots in the ground of the Archangel tree, like you see in your Loki series and you see in Scandinavian mythology. These are different world lines. These are different universes. You call them parallel universes. If you looked at it, it wouldn't exactly seem parallel. If you looked at it from a particular perspective, it would look like if you looked at a tree that was very old and you saw these lines of the tree, the bark and the rings of the tree, if you were to cut it down, which would be very bad, but I'm just saying, if you were to see the innards, you would see as one solid multiverse existing within the edges on the edge of omniverse and super omniverse. Then you have spirit, which is super omniverse. Omniverse is also oversouls, and you have all of this kind of almost looking like ornaments on a tree, but I wouldn't actually go that far. That was a different symbol. But in this, you see all of these timelines wrapped around with their fragmentaries and their juts and branches, but you would see it as one big tree. And this is what people are experiencing a lot, and you have the dimensions that are beyond that. Here on Earth, as the Scandinavians call it, the Midgard, or guarding the middle ground. Then you have other areas where a version of Asgard sits, and you have all these other dimensional worlds, interverse layers upon interverse layers, which, if a regular human were to look into this, they would go insane because of the different infinite diversity and infinite combinations. He usually says these things in his head to a point where I want to bludgeon him. But he is the Rain Man of the multiverse, where he can see all of these things.
Have you seen from the perspective of the Norns where it looks like a quilt?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's what I'm more familiar with.
Yes, that is a perspective. Like say if you were looking at a photograph of a person, what one person notices about the person in the photograph, the next person might not see it the same way. Say you might see a hair color, skin color, clothes, background, people in the background, how big the photograph is, how small it is, what they're wearing, eye color, all of this. You are not wrong, because within that tree, there is a quilt pattern. If you were to look at the bends of this, you would see the quilt pattern interwoven, and you would see the void in there as well, where it's the spaces in between the universes. This is the quilt pattern you were seeing. If this makes sense.
Oh, it makes perfect sense.
So one question to get back to just kind of the general public, because again, we like to be truthful about the difficulties of certain things. One of them that we were speaking about earlier, so I am curious of your perspective, that I think we're all in agreement, is it has to do with opening doors, bringing up things that a person really has no memory of, what that could trigger, what that could do, that, unless something is really figured out to be currently hurting current present moment and concrete, people should not just be volunteering information about a person's history, let's say.
No.
So, yeah, I just wanted your comments.
As your Tony Rodriguez would say as well, it is reckless abandon or reckless behavior. I would say reckless abandon or reckless behavior, he would say. And I fully agree with that assessment. It is extremely reckless to believe that with every individual person, that you have the right to upgrade their base of knowledge by some means of forcefulness or some means of taking your frequency and placing it onto them and thinking you're waking them up. No. No one has the right to impose that on another individual, even in a session, whereas you would see something. You do not always have to say something. I know people are under this premise that your mission is to wake people up by that method. No. It is by your example. It is by your way of being. It is by the fires of information that you light in different places. It is who he or she that is drawn to that information are those that it is supposed to ignite that fire. If you do this to literally every person you encounter, you'd be inviting chaos into their life. Also, they may have had an experience that's totally different than your own, but you are using your own information as a basis for waking that person up. Now, could they have been in a particular place at a particular time that you recognize? Yes. You may even recognize that person. Did you deal with their altar? Or did you deal with this person? Or did you deal with a clone that may have been cloned for that person? Or did you actually deal with that person and now they have no memory and now they have a life in which you are introducing this back into it? Yeah, but could you argue that spirit set that meeting up to begin with for a reason? Sure. But there are so many variations within that tree that, don't you think that Oversoul has figured some of that out already? That exists in multiplicit facets throughout that tree? And that if you dick with that portion of the multiverse, what cascade effect does that happen on the person's mind? Let alone their heart space, let alone the life they are leading. If you are trying to lead the horse to water, No, it'll often jump back into a burning barn with the horse blinders on. But if they've come to you and they are sometimes desperate for answers, but if they're more than simply curious and they are truly remembering, that is when you get involved. Never another time.
I don't generally give them a lot of information. I I personally think that the information they need to remember is out there, and if they're ready for it, they'll find it. And desperation does not mean they're ready for it.
Exactly. That is the opposite. Escapism is the other one. If they are attempting to escape this reality in some way, thinking that the hero's path is the way forward, what you said earlier, the falseness of it, or the desperation by which they wish to resolve something, telling them would make this 100 times worse. Just because they ask, ye shall not receive, but putting a little biblical pun in there. But in this, if they're in that right state to where they are just trying to fill the gaps and they are not pendulum swinging, then that is a time that you share the information. He's learned this.
I don't always have the information they want,
Exactly.
and I won't go looking if I don't think they're stable.
Exactly. You are doing this correctly, Penny, in this particular area. I know correctly is often different for people, but in this instance, you are doing this the correct way by which then you can assess each individual path. He sometimes, in the past, he didn't know which was which because he was basing this on some information that he felt he had to share. But in this, he's seen what that wrought in its own way. So therefore, a person must come in a already stabilized state, looking for bouncing, let's say, ideas off of other people and not being influenced by what is being said. This applies to past lives as well. But he's gone through this as well as people he's known and seen. They're basing it on a past life. Now, if they're already stable and they've seen these past lives and they know from both lineage and from other lifetimes that this is a thing and this is a foregone conclusion, yes, but there's also a dangerous aspect in basically trying to tell somebody they were a particular person at a point in history, because with that tree in place and that quilt in place, they could be anywhere, anywhen, at any point in time and drawing any of that energy and memory from any point in that dream. So telling them is actually virtually pointless unless, again, they are already accessing this from their own history and it is pointing to the time frame or the moment in which they stand. This is the only time that this should be done.
Well, thanks. And then lastly, this last question before I think it's just time for you to have any final words is, because we always like to talk about healing, where we don't like to just have conversations without, concepts of healing and what to do about it. If you feel that you're really having some of these issues and it really is playing a part in your life now that you may need some help, what do you guys see as some advice on healing from some of these issues that may be bothering you now?
Okay, this is actually a more loaded question than you think. To heal, one must, that is the after effect, the bonding or the effect of actually doing the inner shadow work, the integration, the expulsion, and the balancing of everything involved. Healing then is a result of that process. You cannot heal until you've done all this other work. People flip this around. They think, oh, I'm healing from this. No, you are actually making it worse if you're doing digging. You're actually ripping the scab off over and over again, and you're not allowing that wound to heal because you have not done the proper integration and the proper work
What I found was that sometimes I had to rip the scab off because it was getting infected.
Yes, this can happen as well. Sometimes it is necessary in your case. It is not the same for all. What is the
I
same is,
agree.
yes, it is not the same for all, but in what is the same is the inner work that must be done. But sometimes that takes different shapes. In your case, it was the scab being ripped off so you could purge the infection.
Yes,
That is still part of that work.
yes.
In this instance, when people say they are healing someone, this is like what you were saying, Penny. This is nails on a chalkboard. Also to my,
Yes.
because this is an overused word. This is a, you would say, trigger factor in this, and this is not anywhere close to what is being done. So I even told him in the past, refrain from using the word healer. It is misleading and it is stupid. So, in this particular way, what you're actually doing is if you are assisting someone in this integration, you are being more of a guidepost in that particular way. Now, if you're taking attachments off of people that are preventing them from doing that work, absolutely great. There really isn't such a thing as, and I will say this, there isn't such a thing as an entity put there as a lesson to you, except in instances where someone has come in to do that kind of work to help other people. If this makes sense, this is from my perspective. But the solution behind this is to not go into desperation, to not go into this catatonic, what would you call this, psychosis. Even though you are integrating and in shock and you have PTSD, it is, as the forest people say, the calm or the Anhalam state, meaning that's Lemurian for calm, where you are in this state, though you are experiencing all of these emotions, with which you should. You should not separate some emotional state away from yourself. That was some psyops that was put into the New Age community, saying anger must be separated. No, that creates an altar. Do not do this. You
I
have
agree.
you have to balance. You must balance. You're not a Vulcan either, that you're devoid of emotion and just logic. No, there is an actual race that was based off, by the way, that was more Syrian based. But this and Elven also mix of those two groups. But in this, I digress. Balance is needed. Now, if you have an altar that's destabilizing balance, I will say this. Others that might be doing telepathy with you might be hearing that. And you may not even know it because you might have the cone of silence around you that altar is imposing on you. You might not be hearing what they're saying. Other beings are hearing what they're saying. This is why this is so important, especially going into an age where you're dealing with other beings that are telepathic. Unless they know about this process that humans are going through, they might get butthurt. And he's experienced this and he did not understand why. This is what I'm telling you. Now, beings like myself and other beings that are around him are understanding to this and know the difference between the core soul and little fragmentaries that are created in poltergeists that are created. They know the core person, and myself and a few others and the forest people have helped him through this. Now, what can trigger an altar that was done in the SSP, and I will end this on a positive note and not some scary, creepy thing. Intense magnetic fields from both the earth and artificial sources, electromagnets like MRIs and things of that nature, can basically rattle the brain where that suppression bubble is, even the one that's outside the self. I create the altar, and they can start to force fuse. So, if you're near an intense electromagnet, it will, like a magnet, start to go and bring that everything back to center, because the brain is in that there can be only one type of scenario, or wanting to come to wholeness. And sometimes a desperate mind will want it happened with a band-aid rip. This isn't completely possible. and the artificial piece of technology, also areas of Earth that are reflecting this back at you, if there's a certain heightened energy, will start to cram this back in your face. This is not completely possible to police, except within the self only. Other entities will try to take advantage of other parts of the Earth, either dark parts or other more energetically charged parts of the Earth, may try to either help or hinder this process. But it is always about this integration process that will either draw things to you or repel other things. So this is all I have at the moment. Any more questions?
No, I'm good. I hope, Penny, do you have anything else?
No, I think what you said made sense to me.
Well, good. Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you, Isaac.
Thank you. Yes. So I thank you all, and I will depart now. So thank you. Ugh. Yeah, I could literally see every single thing he was saying. He was more concerned about blowback from Time Core, but it was like the top thing on his worry list there. But yeah, that I
Well,
could.
he was worried about you having me on because I am in Time Core.
Yeah, he was very, very concerned about that. He had nothing against you personally. He had
And
with them.
I hope you didn't think I was threatening because I'm
No,
not. I'm not.
not at
Uh,
all. No.
so
Yeah, not at all. I don't think that it wasn't against you. It was like he knew about Time Core and he knew what they were capable of. So it was that's what he was concerned about. Anything that strikes at us, he tends to get defensive. So
good.
yeah, and
Always good. It's always good when your helpers actually care about you.
And we deal with the forest people, the ones people call Sasquatch, and we deal with them too, and they're the same way towards us. So they made it clear that not all of them are that kind, but but they help us out quite a bit as well. So I don't know if anybody has anything to add before we take this out.
No, I just hope, I mean, probably some people will have to listen to this more than once. But again, the goal is, whenever you listen to one of our shows and with our guests, that, for some people, this may seem like total, I don't know what this is about, and it's okay, just let it go in peace. For other people that maybe, have been hearing and talking, there may be pieces of it that you can understand, and other pieces, again, just leave in peace. And for those, again, that are in the midst of it, we always, again, as Isaac was bringing out, we always want people to know that unfortunately there is inner work that has to be done in your healing process. It's not necessarily somebody else from the outside who is going to be able to just fix this for you, in an instantaneous way, and understand that it is a process. But for many, it is a process worth going through to be able to feel like they're, one again and more in control of their own lives. So we hope you found value in this. And Penny, again, we really enjoyed it. We really did, enjoy this, conversation, and hope you found great value out of it too, sharing like we've done. But
Well, thank you for having me. And I will say, you met, if you didn't know her before, you met Misha Johnston at the conference, and she has told me that I can go from normal to too deep in under 10 seconds.
I've been accused of that. That's what Isaac meant by Rain Man. So that's
Okay.
so that
Yeah.
same way where I go into the multiversal stuff and they want to shoot me at that point. So it's so I'm that way. So if anybody's seen the movie, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. So at this point, we can actually now I close this circle for this episode within true benevolence and no conflicting agendas of this moment in time. So thank you everybody for watching this special episode. We thank you very much for watching this channel. So bye bye now.